My brother's wife was still unpacking boxes in my bedroom when my mother told me to leave. She didn't build up to it. She didn't sit me down. She just appeared in the kitchen doorway while I was making coffee, crossed her arms, and said it the way you'd tell someone to move their car out of the driveway. Marcus needs the space. Leila. You're young. You're single. You'll figure it out. Then she walked away before I could respond, her slippers whispering against the hardwood floor she made me refinish 2 summers ago. I stood there holding my mug. Through the wall, I could hear my sister-in-law Priya's voice directing Marcus where to hang a mirror. In my room, above my desk, where I had worked every night for the past 4 years building a career no one in this house knew existed. My father appeared a minute later. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He looked at the refrigerator. You understand, right? They have the baby coming. They need the room. You've been here long enough. He said it like I was a houseguest who had overstayed my welcome, not a daughter who had been paying the mortgage, the utilities, and my brother's truck payment since I was 26. I understood perfectly. I just didn't say so. I set my mug in the sink, went upstairs, and packed 2 bags. Not because I had to, because I had been ready for this day for longer than any of them realized. Let me tell you what my family thought they knew about me. They thought I worked in computers, some kind of analyst job at a financial firm downtown. My mother had told the neighbors I worked in banking, which she considered vaguely embarrassing, the kind of job you mentioned briefly before changing the subject. My father called what I did number stuff when relatives asked. Marcus, who had failed out of a business administration program 12 years ago and had been running a landscaping company that hemorrhaged money every spring, had once told me at Thanksgiving that I was wasting my potential sitting in front of screens all day. What I actually did was this. I built quantitative risk models for a mid-sized hedge fund. I flagged anomalous trading patterns, identified valuation discrepancies in private equity portfolios, and twice in the past 3 years I had handed evidence packages to the SEC that resulted in federal investigations. My base salary last year was $580,000. My year-end bonus was $210,000. I had not told a single person in my family any of this, not because I was ashamed, but because I had watched what money did to the people in this house. I had watched them extract every dollar they could find, and I had made myself invisible on purpose. I drove an 8-year-old Civic that I paid cash for. I wore the same rotation of plain clothes I'd bought on sale. When Marcus needed $22,000 to buy a second truck for his company, I transferred the money from an account they didn't know about. My parents thought I had saved up slowly. They thanked me once, briefly, and then my father asked if I could also cover the property tax that quarter because cash was tight. I paid the property tax, and the one after that, and the refinancing closing costs the following year. I paid because every time I hesitated, my mother's voice would go tight and disappointed, and I was still, at 30 years old, trying to earn something from her that she had never once offered freely. I was done earning it now. I booked a furnished apartment near my office for 6 months. It cost more per month than the entire household's expenses, which was fine. I had a meeting Monday morning at 7 a.m., and a model to finish that weekend. And I needed quiet. I needed distance. And somewhere in the back of my mind, very quietly, I had already started running a different kind of calculation. It was 4 days after I moved out when my mother called, not to check on me, to ask about the joint savings account. When I was 25, fresh out of grad school and moving back home temporarily, my father had asked me to be added to their household savings account for emergencies. It was meant to be a convenience. If something happened to them, I could access funds. I had agreed without thinking much of it, and over time I had started depositing a small amount there every month as a contribution to household expenses. What I had not done was look carefully at the balance recently. My mother's tone on the phone was casual, almost bored. I'm not seeing the usual transfer from you this month. Did you forget? She said it the way someone might mention a subscription charge, not an ask, a reminder of an obligation she had already decided was permanent. I moved out, I said. You still have the account. I'll remove myself from it this week. A pause, then her voice shifted into something cooler. There's $4,400 in there that Marcus needs for the business. For insurance renewals. He's going through a hard quarter. I looked at the ceiling of my new apartment. Clean white walls. Absolute quiet. I had transferred $4,400 into that account 11 days ago. I'll handle the account removal tomorrow, I said, and hung up. I logged in that night. The $4,400 I had deposited was gone. The $1,200 that had been sitting there before, it was also gone. My name was still on the account, which meant that legally, every cent of that was accessible to anyone else listed. My parents had moved the money to a different account, within 48 hours of me leaving. I closed the laptop and sat for a moment in the silence. Then I opened a different application entirely. One that wasn't available in any app store. One that my employer's risk intelligence team had licensed for 6 figures a year. I hadn't planned to use it for this, but I was already very good at following money trails, and this one had just gotten personal. What I found over the next 72 hours would have been almost impressive if it hadn't made me feel sick. Marcus's landscaping company, Greenridge Property Services, had applied for a small business administration loan 8 months ago. I knew this because the inquiry showed up in a financial profile linked to my father's home address, which was also the registered address for the business. SBA loans are federally backed. They have very specific eligibility requirements. They require accurate reporting of revenue, assets, and existing debt. I pulled the public records. Then I used my firm's access to cross-reference the loan documentation against the business's actual filing history with the state. The application listed Greenridge's annual revenue as $340,000. Their most recent state filing, which I found through the Secretary of State's database, listed revenue of $81,000. The difference was not a rounding error. It was not an accounting approach. It was a fabrication. Someone had inflated the business's revenue by more than 4 times its actual figure to qualify for a federally guaranteed loan. The loan had been approved. $175,000. Disbursed 9 months ago. I sat back in my chair. Through the window of my apartment, I could see the lights of the city, steady and indifferent. I had spent 5 years catching people who did exactly this. Sophisticated people. People with lawyers and offshore accounts and very expensive habits of misrepresenting their financial positions. I had handed their files to regulators and watched careers end and prison sentences begin. And now here was my brother, in a cramped office above my parents' garage, having done the same thing to buy a 3rd truck and a commercial mower he posted about on Instagram. I didn't move for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my colleague Dominic, who had left our firm 2 years ago to open a boutique advisory practice, and who owed me a professional courtesy I had never collected. "I need you to make a phone call," I said when he picked up. "I'll explain everything, but I need you to become someone else for about 30 minutes. Dominic was precise. That was what I had always liked about him. No improvisation, no embellishment, just clean execution of a specific task. He called Marcus the following Tuesday morning as a representative of Meridian Capital Advisors, a firm I had registered as an LLC through a legal services platform the night before. He told Marcus that Meridian had been referred by a mutual contact, that they specialized in growth stage small business financing, and that they had been looking at Greenridge's profile with considerable interest. He mentioned a potential acquisition conversation. He used words like strategic fit and regional expansion, and we move quickly when we see something we like. Marcus called back within 20 minutes. I monitored the email chain through a forwarding address Dominic used for the correspondence. Marcus wrote in a way that told me everything I needed to know about his state of mind. Short sentences. Exclamation points. The word finally appeared 3 times in the first email. He attached a business overview document that included revenue projections, a client list, and a summary of the company's recent financing history, including the SBA loan. The email he sent on Thursday was the one I had been waiting for. Dominic had asked him, as part of the standard due diligence process, to forward the loan application summary that had been submitted to the SBA, just to verify the numbers before moving to the next stage. It was, Dominic told him, a routine step to ensure there were no surprises during the formal review. Marcus forwarded it. I opened the attachment. There it was. Revenue, $340,000. The signature at the bottom was his. The date was 9 months ago. I saved it to 4 separate secure locations. I also, at that point, had something else. 2 days earlier, going through the joint account records before closing it out, I had identified 2 transfers totaling $31,000 that had been moved from the account over the past 18 months, not to household expenses, to Greenridge Property Services. The account my name was still on. My money used to prop up a fraudulent loan application supporting cash flow. My name was attached to that account, which meant, if anyone looked closely, I was connected. That was when the situation stopped being something I was observing from a distance and became something I needed to resolve completely, immediately, and on my terms. I called an attorney named Rachel, who I had worked with twice before on cases where my firm's findings had led to civil action. She was compact and unhurried, and she had a habit of asking 1 question where other lawyers asked 5. When I finished laying out what I had, she was quiet for 4 seconds. "You want to contain your own exposure first," she said. "Yes. And then? I want them to know what they built," I said. "And I want to be the one standing in the room when they find out." Rachel thought about this. "The SBA fraud is federal. If you take this to the agency, the process runs on their timeline, not yours. But there's another angle." She paused. "The joint account. If funds were transferred to support a fraudulent loan application while your name was attached, you have standing to file a civil claim for misappropriation. That creates a formal proceeding. It requires a meeting, with everyone present." She gave me the name of a conference room her firm kept for mediations. I booked it for the following Friday. Rachel sent the notice of proceeding to my parents' address by certified mail, citing my intent to pursue civil recovery of misappropriated funds from the joint account and requesting the presence of all parties named in the account, as well as Marcus, as a related party. My mother called me that night. Her voice was a register I had never heard from her before, tight and uncertain, like a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. What is this letter? A legal notice, I said. I'll explain everything at the meeting. Leila, this is your family. You don't send a letter to your family. I thought about the morning she told me to leave. The way she didn't look at me when she said it. The slippers on the floor she made me refinish. The $4,400 gone in 48 hours. Friday at 10, I said. Rachel's office. I'll see you there. I arrived 40 minutes early. I was wearing a charcoal blazer I kept for client presentations. My hair pulled back. No jewelry except small gold earrings I had bought myself the day I got my first bonus check. I had not dressed like this in front of my family in years. There was a reason for that. The same reason I drove the Civic and kept quiet at the dinner table when my father complained about his investments. But I was not managing their perceptions anymore. Rachel met me in the hallway. She had already reviewed everything. She had one legal pad and the expression of someone who had done this many times and found it consistently clarifying. Your brother is likely to get loud, she said. That's fine, I said. Let him. They arrived together. Marcus and Priya first. Marcus already wearing the look he put on when he was preparing to be wronged by someone. Priya held her bag against her body and looked at the carpet. My parents behind them. My mother in the blazer she saved for church and doctor's appointments. My father's jaw set in the way it got when he was about to tell someone they were being unreasonable. They sat on one side of the table. I sat across from them. Rachel sat at the head. My mother looked at me, and then quickly away. She had expected to find the version of me she knew. The one who flinched. The one who eventually apologized even when she hadn't done anything wrong. She found someone else. Rachel opened the proceeding. She walked through the joint account history, the transfers, the dates, the amounts. My father interrupted twice. Rachel spoke over him both times, not rudely, just with the calm, unbroken continuity of someone stating documented facts. When she finished, Marcus leaned forward. This is insane. You're suing your own family over a shared account? We used that money for the business. You knew what the account was for. I knew what I was told it was for, I said. Household emergencies. Same thing. No. I looked at him directly. It's not. I nodded at Rachel. She slid a document across the table. Marcus looked down at it. It was the SBA loan application. His signature. The revenue figure he had submitted, $340,000. Your actual revenue last year was $81,000, I said. I pulled your state filing. Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. He settled on contempt. You don't know what you're talking about. Those filings are always different from the real numbers. It's an accounting thing. It's not an accounting thing, I said. Submitting materially false information on a federally backed loan application is bank fraud. That's Title 18, United States Code, Section 1014. The penalty is up to 30 years and a fine of up to $1 million per count. The room went quiet. My father put both hands flat on the table. Leila. His voice was low and careful. The voice he used when he wanted me to understand that a line was being approached. You are sitting in a room threatening your brother with prison. I'm sitting in a room explaining what the documents show, I said. What happens next is a choice. Marcus's voice changed pitch. You set this up. That fake company. The emails. You made me send that application. You sent it voluntarily, I said. To a third party. Without anyone asking you to include falsified revenue figures, because those figures were already in the original submission. I paused. What you sent Dominic was a copy of what you sent the government. I didn't ask you to fabricate anything. You did that 9 months ago. Priya made a sound that might have been a breath or might have been a name. She didn't finish it. My mother's voice, when it came, had lost the certainty it always carried. What do you want, Leila? I let the question sit for a moment. I want the $31,000 returned to me in full within 30 days, I said. I want my name removed from the account today, and I want a signed acknowledgement that the funds transferred were not authorized by me and were not related to any legitimate household expense. I looked at her. That's the civil piece. And the other piece? My father asked. Depends on you, I said. If the above is settled, I don't have an obligation to share what I found with anyone. If it isn't settled, Rachel files the civil claim, the discovery process begins, and the loan application becomes part of the public record. I looked at Marcus. After which, what I do or don't report to the SBA is its own conversation. Marcus stood up. His chair scraped back hard against the floor. You've been waiting for this. You think you're so much smarter than everyone, sitting there with your databases and your... Marcus. My father's voice cut across the room. A tone I hadn't heard him use with Marcus in 15 years. Marcus stopped. My father looked at the document on the table for a long time. Then he looked at me with an expression I did not entirely recognize on his face. Not the refrigerator stare. Something less certain. Something close to the look a person gets when they realize they have been profoundly incorrect about the dimensions of a situation. We need a few minutes, he said. Rachel and I stepped out. In the hallway, she refilled her water from a small pitcher on the credenza. and said nothing. That was what I appreciated about her. After 11 minutes, the door opened. My father did the talking. Marcus sat with his arms crossed and his jaw locked. My mother looked at her hands. They would return the $31,000. They would sign the account removal documents. They would sign the acknowledgement. In exchange, I would not initiate any contact with the SBA or any federal agency regarding the loan application. Rachel documented it. The signatures took 7 minutes. No one spoke except to confirm the notary information. When it was done, Priya stood up quietly and walked to the door. She paused and looked back at me, and for a moment I thought she might say something. She didn't. She just looked like she was trying to figure out how long she had been in a house built on the wrong foundation. My mother passed me on the way out. She stopped. I waited. "You could have just talked to us," she said. I thought about this carefully before I answered. "I spent 4 years talking to you," I said. "You stopped listening somewhere around the second truck." She left without a response. The door closed behind her. The click was clean and unhurried and absolute. There is a thing that happens when you stop performing for people who were never paying close enough attention anyway. The silence that follows is not empty. It's enormous, and it belongs entirely to you. I sat at the conference table for a few extra minutes after everyone had gone, looking at the city through Rachel's window. She was in the hallway taking a call. On the table in front of me were the signed documents, tidy in their folder. $31,000. Every cent that had moved out of that account while my name sat on it, unprotected, and apparently available to anyone who needed a deposit for a commercial mower. I thought about all the other amounts. The property taxes, the closing costs, the truck, the years of utility payments folded into my monthly contributions while my parents told the neighbors I worked in banking, which they considered embarrassing. I did not feel victorious. Victory implies a competition, and I had not been competing. I had been surviving, quietly, in a house where I was valued for what I produced and overlooked for everything else. Winning does not fix that. It just ends it. I picked up the folder, straightened my jacket, and thanked Rachel on my way out. I took the elevator down to the lobby, stepped through the glass doors into the flat gray light of the afternoon, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing. My phone buzzed, a notification from my investment account. The balance had updated. Nothing dramatic. The kind of number that would have changed my parents' behavior entirely if they had ever seen it, and which they had not seen because I had been very careful and because some knowledge, once given, cannot be taken back. I did not call them on the way home. I did not text. I had said what needed to be said in a room with documented witnesses and notarized signatures, which is the only language that had ever truly been spoken in that house anyway. 3 weeks later, the $31,000 was in my account. Marcus's business, without the inflated projections to sustain the fiction, quietly dissolved its commercial lease and moved operations to a single truck. My father retired a year earlier than he had planned. I do not know if the two things were related. I did not ask. Priya sent me a message once, a few months later. It was short. Just, "I didn't know about the account. I want you to know that." I believed her. I wrote back 2 words and then deleted them and wrote nothing instead. Some things do not require a response. They just require acknowledgement, and I had already given that to myself. I renewed my apartment lease. I bought a plant for the windowsill, the kind that doesn't need much attention and thrives anyway in whatever light it finds. I go to work in the mornings and run the numbers and find the rot and cut it out, which is what I have always done, and I do it without apology, and without any need for anyone in that house to understand it. My name was on the joint account for 4 years because I trusted people who had taught me to trust them before they taught me to fund them. I removed it on a Thursday afternoon in under 5 minutes. The bank representative on the phone said, "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I said no. I meant it.